The heat of July, baby, the salted hardens on your skin, on your skin.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here with you this evening, and Niall, it's a testament to you, what a lovely bunch of people that have been drawn to your events. It's always filled with fascinating people, so it's a real pleasure to be here. And tonight we're going to start with a bit of an experiment. As I said in my piece earlier, my life was changed in an instant. And since that moment, I've been obsessed with that possibility. And every time I present and any time I work with someone, I believe that it's possible that a question you might ask, or something you might share, or something I might add from my experience could be game-changing for one of you or more of you. That means you radically change your relationship with your children, with your employees, with your purpose. And so I take that really seriously, and I invite you to also give me that permission to open yourselves to the possibility, because we don't always reflect on who we are. We like the same, we like standard, we like things to be certain, but actually that locks us in ways of being that prevent us from being free. A lot of people have spoken already this evening about success in really beautiful ways. I think it's really inspiring. So I'm excited to share with you what I think gets in the way. But before I do that, I wanted to kind of take a read on the room and a read for yourselves. So if you'll bear with me, if you could take your phones out. I've got 3 questions I want to ask you. So first will be your name, but then there's just 2 more questions. Now, this is a short survey, and it's just your name and 2 questions. Now, beyond that, there are some more questions, but I'm asking you not to look at those questions. There's nothing that revealing about them. But it's just, we're going to be asking those questions at the end of my presentation. So just take a moment. I hope it works.
Yeah, works.
Great.
Yeah.
Just answer them now. Yeah, just take a moment. Then we'll return to these. And it won't close out or whatever, so you can just return to it. And so don't agonize about the questions. You can just do it as if Oh, sorry.
Yeah. How many questions we do?
Just 2. Sorry, your name and then the 2 questions that follow. What's that?
How many questions are there?
Just there's more questions, but just please just answer the first 2 questions, because they repeat. So your name and the first 2 questions.
By type form,
And then find out nothing else, yeah?
Yeah, then just put your phone down, don't do anything else. It's not that interesting beyond there until later, so it's not a tease. I just wanted to elicit that before, because I'm hoping that what we share might change some of those responses. So what is the thing, based on that question, do you think that gets in the way of people's success more than anything? Fear. And yet, how many people are actively working directly on their relationship to their fear? Some people will. They'll be doing things that work on it, 100%. You'll be challenging yourself to take yourself to the next level, all sorts of things that incidentally confront that. And some of you may be looking at what is your collection of fears and concerns that have been holding you back. Lots of you talked about working on yourself, reflecting. And that is a vital part of what enables us to be free. So I want to talk about the 3 main fears that prevent us from truly operating at our highest level. And in my experience, this isn't talked about that much in business. Understanding our relationship to ourselves and the extraordinary amount of fear that's involved in being human. Just going from 0 to 2 is packed full of confusion. It's weird. We can't hold our head up for the first 6 months. We don't speak the language. The people looking after us are inconsistent, strange. They definitely don't speak the language. They seem to feel happy based on their validation. If we smile at them, the whole thing's a strange process. And so we develop a system to handle that uncertainty. And that's called our personality. Personality from the Latin root persona, which translates directly as mask. It's an operating system that we've developed to function and manage huge amounts of concern about how it works and do our best to get on with it. But it's a repetitive operating system. We have on average 60,000 thoughts a day. 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that we had the day before. But we can change the quality of those thoughts and completely transform our experience to reality. So in my understanding, there are three main blocks of areas of concern that really get in the way. Three jailers, if you want, that prevent us from being free, that lock in place these fears. And so the first fear is, I'm not good enough. I'm not fit for purpose. Now that has an evolutionary benefit, because if we don't feel good enough, what do? Ideally work hard. Some people implode, give up, right? That's common too. But some of the most successful people in business and in life, they're not driven by joy. They are not super content. And actually when they get there, it doesn't feel so good. Or you sell out, and then 6 months later you've lost your purpose. It doesn't feel good. You notice you're depressed because we're sold this idea that once we've achieved, then we'll be happy. But then money gets a bad reputation. People say, well, money doesn't make you happy. Well, actually, money's pretty great if you're happy. But if you're not happy, money doesn't solve the problem. So being able to add success to what is already contentment, then you're in a more interesting place to have a more interesting life. But most people aren't necessarily spending that much time looking at the nature of why we're blocked and where that comes from, and that feeling of why actually deep down we're not good enough. So yes, on one level, from cavemen, cave women, we are the offspring of the nervous. We are the offspring of the anxious. Because there were really, really relaxed cave people. They didn't care so much about gathering the nuts and didn't keep an eye out for saber-toothed tigers. What happened to them? They didn't make it. They didn't make it. So we are the offspring of the more security conscious, the more nervous. And our society isn't set up in a way to make us content. Even our parents, who are doing their best to encourage us to be better, to take our first step. This is a joyful moment. But actually for kids, this is like, why am I being celebrated for an action? Why is this such a big deal? And it just continues. Then education, you arrive as a first former, and the sixth formers are almost told to create a culture of awfulness. Especially if anyone went to boarding school, they were almost encouraged to be cruel. Our education system is basically split into two halves. We have the state system, which is about keeping the proletariat down. The greatest trick played on the working class was they were trained to believe that if you hoped to be white collar, there was something revolting about you. If you hoped to be in management, that was something awful about your character. What a terrible trick. Do what the bell says. Do as you're told. Don't hope too much. Don't stand out. And then we have the other system of the elite educational system. And so to give that a context, the most powerful soldiers in the world, the most amazing soldiers historically were the Spartans, right? Anyone seen the film 300?
Yeah.
Right? Hardcore soldiers. How did you make a Spartan soldier? You rip them away from their mother at 7, and you put them in a highly competitive, completely loveless environment, and were essentially cruel to them. That is the British boarding school. That is the British boarding school model of education for growing colonial bastards who will completely go and pillage the third world and will not even notice, drinking gin and tonics at 4 o'clock, feeling completely fine about what they're doing. This is a problem. But we also have within society this kind of secret code by which we can be afraid and not notice. It's called politeness. It's like, hello, I'm absolutely terrified. You're absolutely terrified. Let's be very polite to each other and let's not challenge each other. Say anything too awkward. And just make it easy so that we can operate without recognizing we've actually got huge amounts of concern about who we are, how we're doing, how we're feeling. This turns up in every boardroom, in every leadership conversation, in every enrollment, in any recruitment. This is at play in business every day. And yet what are we thinking about? What is my right-hand man's relationship to his father? Because he's going to be projecting that onto the boss. What is your relationship in your family, your dynamic? Where were you? What's your birth order? Who here are firstborns? Okay, so interesting. In a high-achieving room, it's most common that you'll have a higher proportion of firstborns. Now that's interesting. The firstborns are going, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. That sounds about right. And these are psychological generalizations, right? This might not be true for you or your family, and it depends. But typically, if a second child comes along before you're kind of 3, then invariably the firstborn will feel replaced. They will feel replaced, and they will have many mixed feelings about that. And what they usually do is double down on being better. And they have something to prove, and they have something to win, and the validation. Now, interestingly, the second comes along, they're already in a world where there's other kids, right? But the first role of high achiever, the good one, that role's gone. So more commonly, the second born is more trouble. They go off the rails more.
Hang on a minute.
They go off the rails more.
Just point fingers.
They're statistically more likely to take a lot more drugs. They're more likely to be sporty and social. And that's not because that's anything to do with their character. They've turned up in the play of the family, and the lead character of good boy achiever has gone. So they'll go another route.
Can we see who the seconds are?
Yeah, let's do the seconds.
Now, but it's no joke. So I did some work with a man called me a couple of years ago. And so when I was still a jobbing therapist and I was working with a whole range of different people. And he said, I need your help with my kind of 9-year-old boy. He's got oppositional disorder. I was like, oh, really? Another one of these labels that you can sell drugs to. I was like, tell me about it. And he told me the story. And I said, no, I think what your son has is a classic kind of firstborn syndrome. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, well, you know, the other child came along a few years later and you didn't manage it very well and they kind of hate you for doing it. But they blame themselves. And so they're now kicking off. And they've been good for a while, but they've run out of hard drive and they're acting out. And he went, that sounds like absolute nonsense. And I said, let me speak to your son anyway. I spoke to his son. Within about 10 minutes, it was very clear to me it was an absolutely accurate analysis. And so I spoke to the son about whether he'd be willing to speak to his father in a particular way. It's called an amnesty conversation, where the kid can say whatever they want, however they want. And the parent will just listen without judgment. So the kid agreed, and I spoke to his father. I said, listen, he's agreed to this thing. Are you willing to have this conversation? And he said, yeah, I just don't think this is right. He's got oppositional disorder. I said, well, just have this conversation. And he called me back about half an hour later. He went, yeah, no, you were absolutely right. I was like, what did he say? Well, he said that if we loved him, we'd cut her up and put her in the bin. About his little sister. And so, but within that conversation, and I've had to do this with my firstborn child, we've held space for her to express her feelings, express her anger, express her frustration. We've helped her understand that she wasn't replaced. It was nothing to do with her being faulty. But this isn't just about birth order and our sibling experience, it's also about our relationship with our parents. Even if we were brought up with enlightened, caring, fully present, engaged, positive parents the whole amount of time, our childhood is still fraught with moments where our needs are not met. And it's frustrating and it's upsetting, but we can't process it. Because the first rule of being a child is that our parents are safe. They have to feel safe, even if they're not. Why? Because if they're not safe, we are effed. It's too scary. We can't function. So we dip them in gold, and we just choose to believe, no, they are right. They are correct in their thinking, they are correct in their behavior. But what then happens when their behavior towards us isn't great? There's only one way we can make sense of that psychological aberration. If they are right, and their treatment of me is not good, I must be terrible. And I saw it explained on a meme so brilliantly a while back. It said, don't shout at your kids. They won't hate you. They'll hate themselves. We would rather, as a child, believe we are the problem. And we internalize that so deeply. Then we get to school, it's compounded. Then every advert we've ever seen compounds that we're not okay until we've become something. And we get caught on this treadmill. Oh, I'm going to achieve and I'm going to become better. And in this time next year, it's all going to be great. It's all going to be great. And it's not where it comes from. And it's not what creates the contentment and happiness that we're seeking. that most of us haven't actually looked at those moments. And to be honest with you, we get away with it whilst we're busy. And, you know, our projects often are business. The idea of business and busyness is not lost. So many of the business owners I help, they're lighting fires so they can run around and put them out. Because they don't want to stop and feel. Because if they stop for a minute and feel, they're going to have a whole bunch of feelings that they don't know how to process. And so our addictions and our way of avoiding and the way of anesthetizing enable us not to feel. And then you go to the doctor and you're like, I don't feel good. And they're like, oh, you have an imbalance of chemicals in your brain. You're like, oh, okay, cool. If you got the chemicals, I'll put them back in and I'll get back onto the treadmill. I'm like, what? It's not that you feel bad because you have an imbalance of chemicals in your brain. It's because you feel bad you have an imbalance of chemicals in your brain. Don't top up the chemicals. Ask yourself, what am I doing? Where am I in alignment with who I am? What am I not doing? What's not working? My work is about helping people stop and listen and feel. And what I found is even the darkest, most challenging feelings, they are chatty. They will tell you where you are off. They will tell you what you need to change. But our society is designed to be polite, don't stop, don't feel. So we have the inner young version of us who's holding on to all of this pain. And like I said, we can get away with it for a while, but after a while, our hard drive gets full. You ever tried to use a laptop with the hard drive is full? And it opens, it takes you like 10 minutes for the email to open, and the cursor has a 30-second lag. It doesn't work. And yet, traditional systems will tell us, well, you need to spend 10 years talking to someone about your challenges. And there is a place for talking therapy, but also for most everyday people, they haven't got that kind of time. And often, talking therapy actually just gives you a much better intellectual understanding of why you're dysfunctional, but doesn't stop you from being dysfunctional, which is actually worse. It's actually worse. They take away your excuse, and then you've got nothing, you're left with nothing. And so understanding how to access your unconscious, how to locate those moments in time where our needs were not met, where we doubted ourselves, where we learned something about what life was or what money was or where happiness came from. Most of the programming is dangerously toxic, which is why we have someone in the world every 40 seconds thinking it would be better to die than to continue living. And for most people that do that, it's not even because they want to die. They just want the feelings to stop. It's extreme stress relief. And the research they've done on the, I think, 43 people that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge but survived, 80% of them regretted it after they jumped, which is heartbreaking. And the truth is 85% of all people will experience some significant challenges with their mental health at some point, at some stage. That's normal. And that's not a threat, that's a massive opportunity. The truth is, because of my ideas about these things, when people turn up in crisis or clogged with concern, I'm super excited. Because I'm not going to anesthetize it, I'm not going to avoid it, I'm not just going to talk about it, we're going to take them in. And we're going to feel it, and it's going to tell us what's off. And then they're going to be able to rebuild their life. But the massive, the biggest, the unspoken concern that is not covered in most modern life is what? Death. I mean, that's what most people are fucked off about. You think it's the fax not being sent, or not getting the girl, or not getting the job, but actually, somewhere between 3 and 5, we work out we're not going to make it. We don't know that before 3. It's like young dogs. They will like jump at moving cars, right? They've got no idea of the concept of death. But somewhere between 3 and 5, mainly thanks to Disney movies, parents, you know, wow, it's quick how they kill them off. Of course, Walt Disney's mum died really early. And that's why that theme's there. And it's also really important. And so I have been talking to my 3-year-old and younger children about their relationship to death. You get them going, they need to talk about it a lot. They're scared you're going to die before they're grown. They're scared they don't understand. They have so many questions, which means you probably did too. And as adults, we're like, oh, I hope I don't suffer, but I'm okay, you know, I'll be all right. But there are other parts inside you that have mixed feelings about it. And yet, how many people have actively looked at their relationship to death? Whereas most of the spiritual traditions, the esoteric aspects of their philosophies, the bits that actually make people more content, there's a central theme in almost all of them. Choosing to fall in love with the concept of death. Why? Because it's finite. It makes every strawberry a fucking miracle. It's like a miracle. But we'll eat 20 strawberries watching Netflix, or not even watching Netflix, spending 20 minutes deciding what we're going to watch on Netflix. Scrolling on Netflix, not even watching anything. And we could have eaten 20 strawberries and not even tasted one. Like, it's an extraordinary thing to be alive on this crazy planet. So it's not just about feeling your difficult feelings, it's also feeling the bliss. Our essential aspect, the essential element of consciousness is bliss. We get so clogged with our business and our hard drive is so full, we don't even stop to notice that if we spent 10 minutes eating one strawberry, we could weep. Like, weep. And then it's like, oh God, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And COVID was an extraordinary opportunity to stop and think, what the hell am I doing? And why am I doing it? And what am I going to do next? And unfortunately, for a lot of people, the reason why mental health is so huge is that a lot of people didn't really have an alternative. They didn't have solutions, and they didn't know that you can do this work on yourself. That there are systems and tools. So the app that we created is a library of 280 guided meditations that enable people to look at themselves and ask themselves these questions and start changing it. And actually, for everyday people, it's perfectly safe to do that work by yourself. It's lovely to do it in community with people, but it doesn't involve spending a fortune on therapists. You can do it yourself. I mean, yeah, if you have serious mental health issues, it's not appropriate. But most people who are functioning, they're fine. And it's normal to have this ball of tension in our system that we haven't looked at. Or we may have looked at it a bit, we may have done some good courses, but to really look life square in the face, including death, and to fall in love with it, and to give it your blessing. When it's my time, I'm good to go. Including my kids. It's like, this is the deal. If you had kids, you chose for them to die. That's not morbid. It's beautiful. If we live forever, we wouldn't give a shit about anything. It's because it's finite. Like, I spoke to Niall about possibly getting a kind of dunking pool, and the plan was what we were going to do. It's kind of like a death baptism. So, I was going to put your head under the water until you were nearly, like, dying, right? And then you would bring your head up, and the next breath would be golden. Absolutely golden. Can you imagine how amazing that would have been? Right? You know, I mean, you just, I think that's just a slight twist on the baptism piece, right? It's like, I'll take you to God, motherfucker. It's like, you know, it's like that would wake you up, right? And it would wake up what's important. Like I could say to you, what's more important? I'll give you £10 million, but you don't get to wake up tomorrow. You'd be like, I won't take the money. That means tomorrow is worth more than £10 million. But we don't necessarily stop to appreciate it. It's wild. And yet there's so much that we can do. And there's so much that we can learn. There's a plethora of information and brilliant things that you can go and do to actually ask yourself, you know, how much is fear actually operating? How much is my birth order affecting me? How much is my story of my dad playing out with my kids? How much is the story of my dad playing out in opposition? Because unfortunately, humans learn with pendulums. Across generations, we kind of pendulum backwards and forwards from extremes, and over time, slowly consciousness evolves. But just to kind of bring this home, I used to do this random thing where I'd have all your names in a kind of black velvet bag. And I'd say randomly, I'm going to pick one of your names out of a hat, and I'm going to get you up here, and you're going to do a little dance and do a little song. But what I've worked out is more fun.
Easy.
You'll be fine, right? Okay.
That'll be all right.
But what I've worked out is actually a more powerful exercise if I just choose you from a kind of felt sense. And so I'm going to just take a moment to look at all of you. What I say is, please don't not make eye contact. Because if you don't make eye contact, I'm definitely going to choose you. Okay? I'm not going to get anyone up here. I'm not going to get anybody up here, right? But just notice. Just notice that was tense for some of you. Like, properly fucking terrifying, right? It's like, and you're amongst good people, right? And to be honest, if I'd forced someone to do it, you would have felt so bad for that person. You would have just had nothing but love for them, right? There really was no threat. Like, you logically know there's no threat, but my God, to your animal self, that's terrifying. But how do you think that plays out in who you approach, or who you ask out, or having that difficult conversation with your spouse, or like, this fear gets in the way. And yet we can change it. We can learn how to change our relationship with life and ourselves, and look at our story and look at what it's done. And for me, I'm reminded, as a kind of final point, and then we can open to a Q&A, but I'm reminded of probably the best advert I ever saw on a billboard ever, and it was in the 80s. Some of you may remember this. And so I'm going to...
You're not old enough.
I am old enough.
I can tell you that.
Yeah, you can tell me, yeah. I'm 51, so I'm old enough. So I'm going to paint the picture for you, okay? So it's a yellow background, and you've got Carl Lewis, who is the fastest man on earth, in a kind of red mankini, which mankinis are bad anywhere, but on athletes like Carl Lewis with his carved black body, quite amazing, right? And so he's in the sprinting position, and as you see the advert, it's like, wow, that's Carl Lewis, and he looks just primed. He's going to beat the world record for the 100 meters, right? It's the most amazing photo. And then you scan down the photo, looking at his muscly legs, and then you notice one problem with the picture. Does anyone else remember this advert?
Wearing high heels.
Yeah, he's wearing bright red stilettos. Now, if you try to win races with your business, with your life, in your relationship, but you are wearing the wrong foundation, you're not going to do well. You're probably going to break your ankles. It's the same with life. It's the footing, our psychology, our relationship to self. That's the right trainers for the job. And yet we don't even know that we're wearing the wrong footwear. We don't have the right footing. And so thank you for your time listening to this. I want you now just to take a moment to answer the next two questions, which is the same questions again. And I want you to be honest about how possibly the degree to which fear is actually at play in your life, and how maybe now more motivated you are to think about addressing that. Oh, thank you.
You've got to dance now.
What? I'll dance and sing, that's fine. Yeah.
It's good.
You won't like it, but I'll do it. Yeah.
It doesn't matter, we'll love you.
Yeah. You'll love me. You won't love the singing. That's good, that's fine.
I didn't ask you to sing.
I think I answered all the questions the first time.
Yeah.
I didn't really know. Is that right?
Yeah, that's fine. You don't need to about the content. That's just if you want some of the resources.
You're going to look at that now and come back on something. Is that right?
Depends how it works. It might not activate. I might send you the results, but we'll see. Right. I'm trying to, but it doesn't look like it's connecting. So I was ideally going to show a difference in your first position, your second position.
I hadn't asked them, so I think I
Yeah. It's fine. Yeah.
love it.
Guys, questions for Thomas? Questions, comments? While he's on the floor then? Good.
I'll kick off.
Yeah.
So you're a very confident public speaker,
Thank you.
and obviously people that, like the thing people are most scared of in the world, apart from death, is public speaking. As we know. So was there a time where you were not okay with public speaking?
Yeah.
How did you overcome it?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, there's loads. So essentially, you know, your relationship to self is the best place to start, because being seen, standing up, being questioned, being judged, trying to serve, it brings up huge amounts. And also tribally, the idea of standing out is threatening. Yeah, it can disrupt the tribe. So in that sense, standing up as an authority, it already brings up stuff, especially because of our educational system. Who are you? Who do you think you are? You better be good. It's loaded, right? Yeah, so letting go of all of those type of things, working on that where you're self-possessed, you know.
How did you do it?
So the journey of looking at all those moments where I doubted myself, and looking then at the second part, which is the inner cave person who wants to, you know, be liked by the tribe and doesn't want to output too many calories and doesn't want to take risk. You know, we have a very primal being inside us that's very risk averse. And it's like, well, you could go on stage and it could be great, but yeah, what if it's bad? And so being able to know that some of the most powerful techniques is a thing called parts negotiation. And most people don't realize that you can locate parts of your operating system and have a conversation with them. You can say, hey, this is the part. So I'll give you one example of a guy I worked with once. He was afraid of public speaking, but he had been a very capable, confident public speaker. That's weird, right? Yeah. How do you lose that? So we went in and we found the part that was now blocking his ability to feel comfortable public speaking. And I said, what's going on? And the part just went, he's overworking. I was like, oh, I didn't even ask that. I was like, well, how much are you working? He's like, oh, I work 7 days a week. And I work like 16 hours, like Monday to Friday, and I do like 8 on Saturday and 4 on Sunday. I was like, oh, that's terrible. Your soul's had enough. Like, are you willing to do less? And we had to broker a deal. And I spoke to that part. If he does less, and it takes at least 1 full day off, will that be okay? The part went, absolutely. Next Tuesday, got a text. Oh my God, that was amazing. I just delivered to 2,000 people. No nerves, no anxiety. Thank you so much. Amazing. I was like, I should have charged more for that session. I do now. It was a long time ago, but but he called me 6 months later. He called me 6 months later, and said, I need another session. I didn't need to do another session. What did I need to ask him? Are you overworking? And he was again. I was like, you know the deal. Stick to it. It's amazing. People don't realize you can locate these choices that our unconscious is making. The unconscious is the boss of the system. Mm-hmm. And you're able to engage with that operating system and make tweaks, make new deals, make arrangements. And that, to me, is the majority of the work that I do with people, teaching them how to do that for themselves. This is an ongoing process. So clearing out the emotions that we've trapped, that we've stored, of the sadness and the fear and the anger that we just squash down to be good and get on with it, and just that we've packed down. So clear the hard drive of the emotions that are trapped in your system and dissolve the limiting beliefs that you built to make sense of it, which is blaming yourself or thinking it's normal or thinking you have to overwork. Those 2 techniques are life-changing.
You mentioned earlier you had an epiphany.
Okay. I'll tell you that story. So up until 27, I was a lost person, deeply lost. My father, who was a surgeon, scientific man, he was loving, but he was a passionate atheist, like a passionate atheist, no agnosticism at all. He brought me up to feel sorry for anyone who had any religious beliefs or any kind of spiritual beliefs, and I did. I thought they were nonsense. And as a result of that, I didn't have any sense of purpose or meaning to anything. And so unsurprisingly, because there was also trauma in my life, I just got into obliterating myself, looking for happiness in all those places, getting into anesthetics of freedom, and I found myself in the early 90s discovering rave culture. And I went long and hard and deep into that world, and I loved it. And it was, I realize now, fairly spiritual. And my original kind of baptism of that was in Goa in the early 90s, which were the best parties in the world. Thousands of people from all over the world who just had enough of the Thatcherite nonsense, which happened everywhere of the 80s, and just went there just to go, fuck that. And it had such an impact on me that I just found myself just embroiled in that world for years. But I was trying to build freedom and be out of the rat race, and I, as I said to these guys earlier, I was walking around with far too big, oversized silver durian, trying to pretend I liked smoking cigars, but I thought I was happy. But I wasn't. I didn't know that at the time. But when the millennium was the New Year's Eve for millennium, I'm like, wow, New Year's Eve can be disappointing, but I cannot have the start to a new millennium in 2000 be disappointing. I can't do it. I was like, I know, I'll go to Goa. It's going to be epic. It's going to be epic. So I wasn't going to India for some kind of spiritual purpose. I was going for some kind of rave tourism, So I wasn't any kind of spiritual seeker. I wasn't a truth seeker. I was quite content with my version of reality. And if you'd asked me, I would say I was a pretty confident, relaxed person. I didn't know I was packed in with fear. I had no idea. And I find that really interesting, that you can operate with so much fear and not even know. And So that evening, we kind of drove around to try and find the best party. There were a whole bunch of parties. And we ended up coming back to the party that was right by our hotel in Vagator in North Goa. And it was an enclosure, but it was outside. And there were trees, and they were all uplit. And they kind of dip wool in fluorescent paint and stretch across the dance floor with UV light. So it looks like lasers, but they just don't move. And all around the dance floor, there would be like, this is like a 2,000-3,000 person party. Around the edge, there would be these kind of stalls, chai mamas with tatami mats on the floor, with kerosene lamps to make chai and sell biscuits and all those things. It's a crazy scene. And up until kind of midnight or 1 o'clock, it's also got thousands of crazy Indian men jumping up and down, drunk on coconut liquor. But then the true raving starts after about 1:30. And that night, I hasten to add my epiphany, I was completely sober. The night before, not so much. And so for me, I am passionate about the power that psychedelics can have in people's personal journey, and the new science and new research is showing extraordinary benefits of proper controlled experimentation, explorations and retreats with psychedelics, which I'm passionate about. But I started dancing about 1:30 on January 1st in the year 2000, and I carried on dancing until the sun came up, which was fairly normal for me at that time. But I kept on dancing. I'd stopped for a few loo breaks, but I carried on dancing until the sun went down, and I stopped about 11:30, so I danced for about 17 hours. It's like 4 or 5 ultra marathons. And it was an incredible experience. It was an incredible experience. When I'd finished dancing, I thought I was going to sleep for a week. And I went to find my motorbike, but it was a sea of motorbikes still. I couldn't see it, but I was walking distance to my hotel. So I dragged my broken body back to the hotel, and I passed out on the bed, presuming that I'd just sleep for weeks. But I actually woke up at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was clear as a bell. I know that feeling now, but then I hadn't experienced that level of presence. It was so clear, and yet I could still hear this in the distance. I was like, that party's still going on. One thing I was famished, though. I was starving because I hadn't eaten and all that dancing. And it was too early. The restaurants or the cafes that I would go to weren't open. I was like, oh, I'll go and get a chai and have some cakes or something from one of those chai mamas. I'll see who's still dancing. And whilst I wasn't remotely spiritual, I was aware that within India there was a lot of rich spirit, and a lot of the travelers there would talk to you about that stuff. And one thing that fascinated me was the wandering swamis, the wandering mendicants, these holy people, these holy men and women. And there's like 20 million bimbling around India. And I, at the time, thought, well, it's nonsense, the idea that you work for truth and love and you'll be provided for by some divine conscious matrix. I was just like, it's nonsense. But I had respect for their dedication, whilst thinking you probably couldn't do that in Kentish Town in winter, right? India's the country to do that in. But India also, with such a rich spirituality, we see those people as blessing. And it's a misnomer that that they have a begging bowl. It's not like that. They have no money, they have no possessions, but they bimble around as these vessels of truth and love. And if you're lucky enough to spend time with them, you'd feed them and you'd look after them whilst they spent time with you and shared wisdom with you, Sweet, but deluded, I thought. Anyway, I went back to this party, and I noticed one of these holy men at one of the parties, and I was kind of fascinated, like, wow, what does he make of this scene, And I felt such a draw to go and connect to him. Now, I'm used to that intuitive thing now, but then I didn't really know what was happening. I was like, why are you drawn to some old, wrinkly Indian dude wrapped in a yellow cloth? I mean, it felt weird to me. I was trying to work it out with my head, like what could be why, but I thought, we'll just bloody go over there. So I did. And he did that amazing kind of just slight wobble of his head, said hello as I sat down. It was so welcoming. Yeah, it was even just subtler. And I ordered a cup of tea, and I sat down there, and I sat kind of by him. And we were both looking at the dance floor. And I really wanted something to happen, but I didn't know what. And there were a few things happening on the dance floor that were funny, and I found that kind of sweet. But I couldn't seem to get an inroad. So I was a bit confused as to why I was there, but I was hungry, and I was eating some cakes, having my tea. And then this Chai woman, who are normally kind of these warm, welcoming kind of characters, but I guess she'd been there for days, in Hindi, just started having a go at this holy man, which is not what you'd normally see. Now, I don't speak Hindi, and it was pretty gnarly. And my guess was that it went something like, you've been here for days, you've had 5 cups of tea, you know, you're not known for having any money, the party's now winding down, like, when are you gonna, yes, pay for your tea? You're like, are you gonna pay for your tea, you know? Because the holy man might try and blag it, you know, because he's all, you know, he should be provided for. So she was concerned about that. And I thought it was amazing, because without saying anything, he just did another, it was a different type of head wobble, but it seemed to communicate it's gonna be all right. And she seemed to take it. She kind of like huffed a bit and then got back to stoking her kerosene stove. And I thought it was sweet. And then I knew something more than I'd ever known anything. Like I had a certainty that I'd never felt before. And I knew exactly why I was there. And I was there to pay for his tea. It was nothing about having a connection. It was nothing about conversation. It was nothing about getting any of his spiritual wisdom that I didn't even believe in. I was clear enough in my system to get an intuitive impulse to pay for his tea. But it wasn't about praise. It wasn't about thanks. It wasn't anything to do with anything other. It was my job. And it's hard to explain how certainly I knew that. I understand that now, but at the time, I didn't have a context of reference for that kind of intuition. And so I managed to put a bundle of money into a cigarette packet, including some Rizzlers and some cigarettes and some Charis that I thought you might like, because they often smoke a lot of that. And I was able to leave it where I knew he would find it once I'd gone. And I paid for my teas and I left. And I was then flooded with a level of dopamine and joy and bliss that I'd never felt before. And it was like this crazy universe went, well done. Now, I know that feeling now, but then I didn't. And in that moment, my scientific brain felt that I had tangible scientific evidence that here was someone working for truth and love, and he'd just been provided for by the universe via me, because I was clean enough and clear enough and sober enough and present enough to listen to my job and do it. And I proceeded to have what can only be described as somewhat of a meltdown, because I was the funniest, best news I'd ever had. So I started to literally laugh uncontrollably, like it was hilarious. And at the same measure, it was absolutely the saddest fucking thing I'd ever experienced, because I'd lived my whole life thinking that I had to hustle, that I had to do something, and that actually I was in a field. This universe was actually this incredibly connected matrix of consciousness that if you are in alignment, you will be provided for. And as they dawned on me, I had the sound of a female voice essentially explaining that to me in my head. This crying and laughing, I looked like I was having a nervous breakdown, but I liked it. But it looked weird, you know? And so I wanted to get out of there because I didn't want it to stop. So I rushed out of there, and enough people had left the party for me to see my bike. And I saw my motorbike, and I jumped on my motorbike, and I drove up this hill in North Vagator. And then for half an hour, I think where I would describe it is I just experienced my consciousness without fear. And it was in that moment I realized how petrified I had been, and how the whole of human life had made it likely that I was living in fear, and I hadn't even noticed. And ever since that moment, I've been trying to tell people and find better ways of doing it. Of course, my friends thought I'd gone mad, you know, and I heard from other friends that they had said I'd found God, but I was still an atheist. But what I was talking about, they only understood within the terms of that, and I realized, had I been brought up as a Catholic, that would have been a Catholic experience. Had I been brought up a Buddhist, it would have been a Buddhist experience. But because I had a completely blank slate, for me it was just a really pure experience of what I believe to be the true nature of consciousness. And I sent an email to my business partner that day, we're done. And ever since that, I've been on this mission to try and share what I've learned. And what I learned was the biggest thing that prevents us from experiencing that bliss is our unresolved fear. and that it can be healed, it can be resolved.
How do you tie that in with being prescribed for medication for depression and anxiety?
Yep. So the medication can be really helpful at giving us stability, right? But if you're not also looking at the cause and why you've been unhappy, which is either unresolved trauma or clogged with negative emotions that you haven't processed, or something's out of alignment in your present life, or sometimes a combination of the two. So I've worked with lots of people on antidepressants, and I've supported them whilst on that, and then we try and do the work that's actually driving the cause, and then safely, incrementally, when it's appropriate, and in association with their medical professionals, bit by bit, they can come off it. But if you're on those things but you're not looking at what's driving it, then you're going to be on them for a long time, and there are consequences. You know, it dulls your energy, it dulls your vibrancy, it can affect all sorts of things, and so it takes the edge off life, because it's taking the edge off the doom. So it does, for some people, it's game-changing, and it saves lives, but it's not the solution. It's a temporary fix, and it's a valuable one, but there's a piece beyond. There's a piece beyond, and that's true of addictions. No one's got an alcohol problem. No one. No one's got a drug problem. They've just got an unhappiness problem. And you deal with the unhappiness, and then you don't want to drink in the same way. It just changes it. And yet, so many of the treatment systems in our existing world are not functioning. They're not functioning enough. They work a bit, and they're lauded as these great solutions. But
Just coping.
yeah, yeah.
That's the right answer.
Thanks. Anything else? Yeah.
So, in terms of your process, what is it based on? Is it, you mentioned meditations, is it like a mix of like meditations and hypnosis and NLP, or
Yeah.
what are the modalities?
Yeah, so I say to my clients, I've gone on every weird course in the world so you don't have to. And I've codified and distilled the things that think I work. And for me, there are 3 pillars to my work. Restoring someone's peace, which is the trauma healing. Restoring their power, which is all peak performance. That's the typical stuff of peak performance coaching: mindset, language patterns, expectations. And then, and the 3rd pillar is about purpose, which is our relationship to life, meaning, and death. And so all of those have an aspect of transcendence in. So when I looked at, after this moment, I went from not caring about learning at all. I didn't engage in school at all. I didn't care. You could read the amount of books that I read by the time I was 27 on 2 hands. I really didn't care. I just wanted freedom and pleasure. Ironically now, I still see myself as a hedonist. I just got way better tools and potions. But so in those 3 pillars, there are 2 techniques in each. So there are 6 techniques, I call them the big 6. And those are the things that I teach all my clients. You learn those 6 techniques, you're much more likely to be happier, be able to be more successful. You'll actually enjoy your success. You'll live with more harmony. You'll have a better clarity of who you really are and what you really want to do. So I'm all about teaching my clients how to maintain this stuff by teaching them these 6 techniques. So in the period of time, I usually work with people for about 6 months. And in that time, we cover all the techniques. I walk you through them. And it's a combination of hypnosis, meditation, anything that gets you to the unconscious. And so it's a combination of lots of different things.
So I've got a question that's a bit echoing Anne's question, which is, I totally agree that one of the things people fear most is public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I totally get that. It also feels to me, having created a lot of sort of moments for speakers, that it's something that is very good for them. People say it's like cathartic. I certainly found when I kind of spoke for the first time publicly at Anne's community, and I immediately thought about the things I could talk about. It felt a very good feeling. I found it cathartic, and I have this thing called the cue, where people come up to you and start talking to you about what resonated for them, it felt really, really, really powerful. I also felt a lot of fear doing the talk, and I was thinking, I wish there was more spaces for me to practice before I could do it confidently. So the question really is, given that it's so good for us, why is it such a problem to show up and be seen in that kind of way? Do you know what I mean? It must be big. It is. I get that it's a big fear.
Mm-hmm.
What is that really about? Given that it's a good thing for us once we do show up.
Yeah, it really is. Usually the younger version of us within, who just didn't get enough certainty. Humans, I mean, a problem with humans is our brains are too big, and so our skull is too big, so we're born early, right? We're uncooked, we're half cooked, we're 3/4 cooked, and that's odd. So we have a lot of early year confusion. There's a lot of uncertainty. We don't really know what the hell's going on. And that really stays with us. And people say, well, you can't remember what happened pre-5. It's like, no, you can't verbally remember. Because if I asked you to tell me about your last holiday, you'd use nouns and verbs, right? Without that, you'd be like, right? So before we have nouns and verbs, we don't have the capacity to recall memory easily, but the memories are there. But the system that we use, our memory system, is like a grabber. What it grabs onto are words. So it's very difficult to recall that memory, but actually using these tools, you can. And in those early years, it's filled with, am I okay? You know, can I be seen? Is it safe? And the reason why I get people to think about coming up here, another exercise you can do, which is fun, is you get people to unlock their phones and then just hand it to the person next to them. It's just like, you know, it's like, no, we are packed full of fear, right? And so, for me, it's emotional detox. It's like we have to clear the hard drive of this existential terror that most of us have got. We just don't, society's set up so that we just don't really notice.
Also, the other thing is, I think, from running some speaking events online, is that actually it's okay to also feel the fear, and that I think a lot of big speakers still feel frightened.
I did.
And actually not understanding that actually that's part of it and just get on with it. It's like, it's not always going to kill it by doing all this, lots of things. It's actually just get on and do it.
100%. I sat there and my human me listened to all these amazing people telling their amazing stories, you know, big exits from big business, you know, and my little me was like, who am I to talk about this stuff, right? And I found waves of nerves, you know, and probably didn't eat as much of the food as I would have liked because I didn't want it to get in the way, you know. And it's like a long time ago I made the commitment that I would never plan my work with my clients or plan my speeches. And so for me, I look to confront my fears, because by confronting them, you become more courageous. And so one of those things is to come to a place like this with eminent folks and to actually know, I know that my subject, but I'll rather respond to what the room is. And then, you know, it's not completely ad lib because I have set pieces. And my brain goes, say that one. Talk about this. And I go, okay. But how they come in, I'm sat there and I don't even know how I'm going to start. I'm not totally sure about how it's going to begin. And it's kind of terrifying. But for me, the more I get out of the way, the better it is. Yeah.
We're not preparing,
Just laziness. Yeah. It's a narrative now. That's it.
So a little bit of fear. We need a little bit of fear.
100%. And there's a place for fear. You know, if a saber-toothed tiger walks into the room, it would be appropriate to get scared and run fast, right?
Otherwise we wouldn't, we're humans, so you need your senses need to tell you something.
100%.
I guess we live in a world of our fear response is still running away from the tiger, and it's actually public speaking, our bosses, sitting next to Niall.
Our body only registers fear as a threat of death. So whatever we're nervous about speaks to our soul. I could be, if I do a bad speech, I'll be killed. So that's our animal is responding to anxiety as though we're in danger. So you're absolutely right. But you don't want to lose that, but what you don't want to be doing is running your life with that. If you could imagine that we have what I'd call is our act out line. So let's say no stress is here and 70% stress. When people usually get above kind of 70% stress, that's when they'll reach for a drink or they'll lash out or they won't be their best selves, right? And if you've had a bad day and I called you up and said, tell me about your bad day, you'd say, well, A happened and then B happened and then C happened and then D just popped me over the edge. And that's why I went mental at my kids, right? But most people don't realize they're not waking up at 0. They're waking up at 40. 50 maybe even. So you only need 1 or 2 things and you're off the edge. My work is about let's clear the unresolved decks. So then you've got way more capacity to deal with the inevitable annoyance and frustrations of modern day life, but without losing your mind over it.
Selfish question. So they've got 2 young boys.
Yep.
What age, is there an age, and I've just speaking to a father today who's at work and I can't get him into work because his
son suffering from low self-esteem and all this sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Is there an age where you can't do these techniques? Is there a period where the testosterone's pumping through the body and they're just going to bounce against you and not adopt this stuff, or can we start early?
I mean,
Can I set my kids up to be a success now?
Yeah, definitely you can. You know, definitely you can. You know, marinate them in love, speak positively as best as you can. Be warm and loving and expressive of your affection, all the good standard stuff. But know that they come into this world with a whole bunch of, like, existential terror.
Can we give them the tools that I mean now?
Yeah, in light form, you can. And mainly, it's about helping them understand that their emotions are healthy and that their fear is healthy. So when my kids come home from school, we say they've run out of yes. Because they're pretending to be decent humans at school, because they have to be, right? And they're fed up of it. And so we get them just to have a no off, right? So they come in and we're like, okay, you've run out of yes. Because they're just defiant and miserable. And so we're like, okay, just start saying no over and over and over again. We did this a few months back, and they didn't stop shouting no for about 5 minutes. Top of their voices. We put on some crazy drum and bass, and they just danced it out, and then we had a nice evening. You know? But helping my firstborn, you know, say, listen, we know you love your sister, and a part of you wishes that we hadn't had her, because she's ruined it since she's been here. You used to get all the attention, and so it's okay. So we say that there's a part that loves her. She'll say, a part of me loves her. And say, there's a part of you that hates her and wishes we hadn't had her. She's like, I wish you hadn't had her. We're like, oh, I really hear that, baby. That's okay. Because she's going to bed thinking she's a bad person with that thought. But we're expressing it. And we're like, now tell us you're angry at us for ruining it. That's really hard, because we're golden, right? We can't be bad. So we help her express her feelings. Help them all express their feelings. That's the most important thing. Acknowledge their feelings and help them realize. Share with them your process of your own difficulties. We're all mad. You know, it's just everyone's pretending not to be, and it's a real problem.
I agree.
I mean, that's like, I don't know you, but I know what it's like inside your inner world, and it's a mixture of wonderful and horrible. I mean, it's just, that's what it is to be human,
I
right?
think I was probably going with you, so you probably understand.
I want to be there. I was listening and I wish I'd been there.
I can't remember most of those years.
But, I mean, there are classic no moments that you know most people experience. So, you know, I remember at school on Wednesday it was sports, and there was a kind of, I realise now it was like anti the school. So like there was a race to go from the lessons to go and change to do sports, right? And I remember this day I was running and I was winning, and I was running down the corridor, and you had to go out through this door, down 3 steps, and so you're outside briefly, and then into the place where you changed to get into your PE kit. And I'd won, but Ralph Mayer was behind me, and I'd already won, but I had to seal my victory, and I slammed the door behind me. And he was at the height where the doorknob hit the crest of his eyebrow, and his eyebrow like burst like blood immediately. And my first reaction was to my welfare, because I thought I was going to get in trouble, and not his. And I knew that was wrong, and I knew that was bad, and I didn't know until that moment that I was a bad person, you know, or that I had the capacity to be bad. I knew that was wrong. I knew that was the wrong way round. Whereas I've helped, you know, my kids process that. I mean, once when my eldest was 3, and she was kind of raging, we're kind of playing, and she got super mad, and she swung for me, right? And she's crap, so I blocked it and caught it, you know. And then she's like, "Argh!" And she swung for me with the other one. I quite cockily caught that one. Thought it was pretty clever. And then she went, "Argh!" and went for me. But fortunately, I could stretch her arms out, so her head was like that. I was like, first time it happened, I was like, baby, that would have really hurt. You wanted to hurt me? And she went, yeah. And I really was shocked. And then later, I was like, that was terrible parenting. And a couple of weeks later, she did the same thing again. It's like, caught it. Did it again, caught it, and I knew what was coming. And then so she went to headbutt me, and I stretched her out, so she was like, couldn't get to me. And I went, you really want to hurt me, don't you? She went, yes. And we create this thing of her inner beastie. I said, sometimes I really want to hurt people. Her eyes lit up, like I finally understood. And I said, sometimes I want to tear people's heads off, bite them. And then we would just spend like 20 minutes crawling around on the couch, chewing on cushions and growling. And it was amazing. And so then from that point, we could talk about if her inner beastie was up. And now I find her talking to her little sister about her inner beastie. It's like, I did not get that. I didn't get that. I'd pick up a toy at my friend's house and it would break, and I'd put it back on the shelf and hope I wouldn't get busted, you know, and feel terrible. It's like now my kids know they're terrible people, and that's natural.
Yeah. I'm in.
Right?
So
It's
into this.
important.
So
It's important. We didn't get that.
It's true.
You know, it's not just emotional intelligence around don't be angry, and it's actually like it's primal emotional intelligence.
And actually, I had the opposite, really religious upbringing, but
Right.
that can do this. It's that oppression of like, be good, do this, do blah, 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 blah. And I know that everyone gets it at some level, but keeping that away actually brings more darkness.
Oh, 100%.
More shadow, but it's just not seen.
No,
So it's not dealt with.
no. And
So
that's
it
why,
creates a bigger problem.
yeah, huge. And that's why spiritual congregations can be so problematic, because everyone's packed down their guilt and shame, and it
Right.
becomes a
to
massively
look good.
judgmental place. And everyone wants the vicar to come over, but not the bad family. Yeah, yeah,
Ah.
yeah.
Oh.
Anyway, I'm aware we've done a lot, so thank you, everybody.
The heat of July, baby. The salted heart is on your skin. On your skin.